I was stirring soup when my daughter-in-law slammed a metal ladle against my head. "Who cooks like this, you useless woman?" she hissed, her face twisted with disgust. The hot steel scorched my temple. The pain shot through me like lightning. From the living room, my son didn't move. Robert simply turned up the volume on the television, drowning my cry beneath laughter from a sitcom. 5 minutes later, the kitchen floor trembled beneath falling pots and shattered plates, and me. Robert rushed over, froze in the doorway, and whispered, "Mom, what did you do?" What I did was survive. What neither of them knew was that I still had one last card left to play. My name is Helen Moreno, 71 years old. Once, these hands baked bread for a husband who danced with me every Sunday morning. Once, this house echoed with laughter and the smell of roses from the backyard. Then Henry, my husband of 50 years, died watering those same roses, his heart surrendering quietly one spring afternoon. Since that day, silence has been my only companion. Robert, my only child, called soon after the funeral. "Mom, you shouldn't live alone," he said, voice trembling with practiced concern. "At your age, it's dangerous." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. So I packed my life into 4 suitcases and left behind the home where every wall still whispered Henry's name. Their house looked like something from a magazine: marble counters, glass stairs, and no soul. Dawn greeted me with a smile too polished to be real. "Welcome, Helen," she said, as though I were a guest, not family. No, Mom, not even mother-in-law, just Helen. From that day on, I felt it, the weight of being unwanted. My room was small, tucked at the end of a long hallway. I placed Henry's photos on the wall and tried to make myself invisible. I woke early, cooked, cleaned, folded, and smiled when insulted. When Dawn complained that my coffee was weak or the eggs too salty, I said nothing. I told myself that love and patience would win her over. I was wrong. That night, while the soup simmered and the TV blared, something inside me cracked. It wasn't just my skull. It was my faith in family. But that night's bruise would be the first mark of my rebirth. A wound that would one day open a door neither Robert nor Dawn could ever close again. The days that followed blurred together, mornings of chores, nights of silence. I became a ghost in that house. I cooked, scrubbed, folded, smiled when spoken to, and vanished when not. Robert worked late, and when he was home, he lived through screens, the kind of man who checked messages more than faces. Dawn, on the other hand, was a queen in her own kingdom, barking orders in silk robes, her perfume lingering like judgment. Every mistake I made was a personal offense. The floor's streaky. The coffee tastes cheap. Do you ever do anything right? And through it all, Robert stayed quiet. Silence became his weapon. I tried to find refuge in small things. A song Henry once loved. A cup of tea near the window. But the walls were too thin. The contempt in Dawn's voice seeped through everything. One afternoon, I decided to make Robert's favorite vegetable soup. The same one I used to cook when he was a boy with a scraped knee and a big appetite. The pot simmered softly, filling the kitchen with warmth and memory. Then, the storm arrived. "What on earth is this?" Dawn's voice sliced through the air like a blade. "Soup," I answered quietly. "Robert's favorite." She leaned over the pot, sniffed, and twisted her face in disgust. "This looks like swamp water. Are you trying to poison us?" I froze, gripping the wooden spoon like a lifeline. Before I could respond, she snatched the ladle from the pot and struck. The metal hit my temple. Boiling soup spilled across my shoulder. The pain was instant, electric. From the living room came the sound of a TV laugh track, the audience cheering while my body trembled in agony. Robert didn't move. He didn't call out. He didn't even pause the show. When dawn finally stormed out, I stood in the middle of that pristine kitchen, dripping soup onto the tiles, staring at the reflection of a stranger in the glass oven door. That woman, shaking, humiliated, with tears cutting paths through her wrinkles, wasn't me. Not anymore. Something inside me rose, quiet but absolute. I grabbed the pot and poured it into the sink. The crash echoed like thunder. Plates followed, then cups, then everything else that had kept me small and silent. When Robert ran in, he didn't see a mother, he saw a mess. "Mom, what have you done?" he whispered. And for the first time in my life, I didn't answer. I just looked him straight in the eyes and saw the truth. He didn't recognize me anymore. By the next sunrise, his silence would cost me everything, but it would also set me free in a way neither of us could ever imagine. By morning, my bags were packed. Robert stood by the doorway holding $200, not in guilt, but in convenience. "Just until you settle somewhere, Mom," he muttered, eyes fixed on the floor. I didn't cry. I'd already done that. I just nodded and walked out without looking back. The taxi took me to a roadside motel on the edge of the city, a place where the carpets smelled of mold and the neon. Sin flickered like a dying heart. $30 a night. 7 days, maybe 8, before the money ran out. I sat on the creaking bed, staring at the yellowed wallpaper, wondering how a lifetime of devotion could shrink into a single, rented room. When night came, I cried differently this time, no longer for Henry, or even for Robert, but for the woman I had allowed myself to become. Days passed in slow decay. I lived on vending machine, snacks, and shame. I sent messages to my son, gentle at first, desperate later. No replies. Just blue ticks that felt like graves. When the last of the money was gone, I was asked to leave. 4 suitcases heavy with memories, useless in survival. I dragged them down the sidewalk until I found a bench in a quiet park. That was where I slept my first night outside. The ground was cold. The stars were too bright. And the city didn't care. A homeless man offered me a piece of stale bread. "Eat, Grandma," he said softly. "You need your strength out here." The days became a blur of hunger and humiliation. I searched through dumpsters behind restaurants, waited in church lines for soup, and prayed that no one from my old life would see me. Then, one afternoon, while rummaging through one of my suitcases, I found it. An envelope, yellowed and sealed, with Henry's handwriting on it. My breath caught. My fingers trembled as I tore it open. "My dearest Helen," the letter began. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. Forgive me for keeping secrets. But everything I built, the buildings, the accounts, the investments, they're all yours. 13 properties, all under your name. I wanted to protect you, to make sure you'd never need anyone's mercy." I stared at the documents inside property deeds. Certificates, numbers so high they barely looked real. And there it was, among the addresses, Magnolia Street. Robert's address. Their home. The house they had thrown me out of was mine all along. I laughed and cried at the same time. The irony was too cruel, too perfect. That night, the broken old woman on the park bench died, and the real Helen was born. Tomorrow, the city would remember my name. By dawn, I was no longer the woman who had begged for a bed in a church shelter. I was a woman holding proof of her own power. The first thing I did was call the lawyer whose name Henry had left in his letter, Roger Mendel. Within an hour, a black car pulled up to the park, its windows tinted like secrets. The driver spoke my name with quiet respect. For the first time in months, I felt seen. Roger greeted me in an office that smelled of old books and fresh coffee. He listened, reviewed the documents, and confirmed what my heart already knew: Henry had built an empire. 13 properties. Several investments. Over $10 million in total, and all of it legally mine. He looked at me, astonished. "Mrs. Marino, you own the building your son lives in?" Apartment 302, Magnolia Street. The same walls that had witnessed my humiliation now belonged to me. I asked him to draw up new contracts. Rent would rise to market price. No exceptions. Not even for family. But I didn't want Robert or Dawn to know it was me. So I created a new name, Mira Holdings. My armor, my rebirth. Over the next weeks, I transformed. The gray hair turned a warm chestnut. New clothes, new glasses, a steady stride. I learned how to read financial reports, manage properties, make decisions. Every lesson felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been stolen by years of silence. When the rent notices went out, Roger called. "Your son isn't happy. He says the increase is impossible. Then he'll have to learn that comfort has a cost," I replied. Within months, the facade of their perfect life crumbled. Debts piled. Arguments escalated. And when the eviction order finally arrived, I attended the hearing, sitting quietly in the back row, unseen. Robert stood there, defeated, pleading for mercy. Dawn glared at him as though she'd already left. The judge's gavel fell, and it was done. He had 10 days to vacate from the home that had always been mine. Afterward, Roger and I sat in silence at a cafe. "What you did wasn't cruel," he said softly. "It was fair." I nodded, though fairness had never felt so heavy. Weeks later, Robert requested a meeting. He walked into the office, saw me behind the desk, and froze. "Mom?" he whispered. "Yes," I said. "I'm the owner you've been begging to meet." Tears filled his eyes. Apologies poured out the words I had once begged to hear. I didn't forgive him. Not then. Forgiveness isn't a gift. It's a bridge that must be rebuilt from both sides. Months passed. I moved into a quiet house surrounded by roses. I painted, volunteered, and learned to breathe again. Then one morning, the phone rang. "Mom," Robert's voice said softly. "I've found a job. I'm trying to be better. Maybe one day I'll have coffee with him. Maybe not. But for now, I sit under the morning sun, surrounded by life, whispering the truth I earned in blood and silence. Self-respect isn't revenge. It's resurrection. Because sometimes, to find peace, you have to lose everything, even the people who once called you family. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story so more people remember. No matter how old you are, it's never too late to stand up for yourself.